Hello, students. Today we are going to understand the chapter Weathering the Storm in Ersama, written by Harsh Mandir. Harsh Mandir was born in Shillong in the year 1955. He is a writer and social worker. And you know that he has worked as an IAS not only in the states of Madhya Pradesh but also in Chhattisgarh, and that too almost for 2 decades, and mainly as the head of district governments of tribal districts. He is associated with social causes and movements such as communal harmony, Dalit, tribal, and disability rights, the right to information, homeless people, custodial justice, and bonded labor. He writes regularly on issues of social justice and he has written many books. He was awarded the Rajiv Gandhi National Sadbhavna Award for Peace Work and the Amy Thomas National Human Rights Award too. You know, this story is a true account of the devastation brought about in Odisha in year 1999 by a super cyclone. This lesson conveys the message that when a natural calamity strikes, the member of community should help themselves. They should not be totally dependent upon the government to provide help. It also gives the message that the youth have a major role to play in organizing the community to help themselves. Youth should provide the leadership role to solve the problems of the common people. In this lesson, we see the leadership provided by Prashant during the superstorm in Odisha village. We should especially concentrate our efforts on women and children who form the most vulnerable section of society. So, let's start with the chapter. The cyclone that hit Odisha in October 1999 killed thousands of people and devastated hundreds of villages. See, the cyclone which occurred in the year 1999 in the Odisha district, it destroyed many villages. For 2 dreadful nights, Prashant, a young man, was marooned on the roof of a house. Means for 2 days he was to sleep, to be on only on the roof of a house. Means he was not at all able to enter the house. Why? Because everywhere the water was there and very dirty things were there. On the third day, he decided to go to his village and did he find his family. On 27 October 1999, 7 years after his mother's death, Prashant had gone to the block headquarters of Ersama, a small town in coastal Odisha, some 18 kilometers from his village, to spend the day with a friend. So, on in the year 1999, on 27th October, that day was just after the 7 years after his mother's death. Prashant, the main leading character of this story, he went to the headquarters of Ersama to visit his friend. He just wanted to spend a day with his friend in order to have a little change. In the evening, a dark and menacing storm quickly gathered. Okay? शाम को क्या हुआ, एक बहुत मिनासिंग स्टॉर्म मीन्स डरावना, थ्रेटनिंग, इतना भयंकर तूफान वहां पर आ गया. Winds beat against the houses with a speed and fury that Prashant had never witnessed before. Means the winds were running with a high speed and it was everywhere. The moment that at that time was very, very threatening, and he had not at all witnessed such type of menaces earlier. Heavy and incessant rain filled the darkness. Ancient trees were uprooted and crashed to the earth. See, heavy and incessant rain. Incessant rains, continuous. The rain which was falling continuously, it filled the darkness. पूरा चारों तरफ अंधेरा था और उसमें बहुत तेजी से बिना ना रुकने वाली बारिश शुरू हो गई. And the ancient trees were uprooted. Means the trees which were very old, they were uprooted, उखड़ गई थी, and crashed to the earth. Screams rent the air as people and houses were swiftly washed away. Screams, चीखना, चिल्लाना, है ना? Everywhere screams were there as most of the people were washed away. Means उस तूफान में कई घर, कई आदमी, कई जाने सब बह गई थी. The angry waters swirled into his friend's house neck deep. Swirled means wills. Chakkar lagana means that water entered his friend's house also, and it filled the rooms of that houses till the neck. Means the water level was very high. The building was of brick and mortar and was strong enough to survive the devastation of the wind's velocity of 350 km per hour. So, as that building was made up of brick and mortar, so it was strong enough to handle the wind's velocity of 350 km. So, that building stood there. इतनी तेज आंधी तूफान को भी झेल गई. But the cold terror of the family grew with the crashing of trees that had got uprooted and fallen on their house sometime in the middle of the night, damaging its roof and walls. So what happened? The tree that uprooted, जो एक पेड़ टूटकर उनके घर की छत पर गिर गया था. The actual time they don't know. They are saying just in the middle of the night, and that tree has damaged the roof and walls of the house. The crazed destruction wrought by the cyclone and the surge of the ocean continued for the next 36 hours, although wind speeds had reduced somewhat by the next morning. The crazed destruction, damaged, जो विनाश हो गया था, that was caused by the cyclone, and the surge means waves, लहरें जो ocean की थी, that continued for the next 36 hours. Means 36 hours तक जो ऊंची ऊंची लहरें उठ रही थी और जो डिस्ट्रक्शन हो रहा था इतना कंटिन्यूसली हवा चलने से और लहरें उठने से, that continued for 36 hours. But after that, the wind speeds had reduced by the next morning. To escape the waters rising in the house, Prashant and his friend's family had taken refuge on the roof. Means in order to avoid the rising of water level in the house, inside the house, they went at the roof of their house. Prashant will never forget the shock he experienced at his first glimpse of the devastation wrought by the super cyclone in the grey light of the early morning. So, the next day, in the early morning, when he saw the devastation which has been brought by the super cyclone, that all things he will never forget in his life. A raging, deadly brown sheet of water covered everything as far as the eye could see. क्या हो गया था कि जितनी दूर भी वो अपनी नजरें घुमाकर देखता तो वहां तक सारी जगह पूरे में पानी पानी भरा हुआ था. Only fractured cement houses still stood in a few places. Fractured cement houses means टूटे फूटे से जिनमें क्रैक्स आ गई थी, ऐसे घर ही अकेले कुछ दूरी पर दिख रहे थे. Bloated animal carcasses and human corpses floated in every direction. Carcasses means dead body. And human corpses. Corpses, you also know, that body of human beings and that animals' dead body, they all were floating everywhere. All round, even huge old trees had fallen. And the trees which were very old, they had fallen. 2 coconut trees had fallen on the roof of their house. At 2 coconut trees, they had fallen on the roof of their house, and this was a blessing in disguise. Blessing in disguise means altering one's appearance to controls one identity. Means जब वो लोग अपने आप को छुपा रहे थे, सब पानी वगैरह से बचाकर अपने आप को छत के ऊपर छुपा रहे थे, तो ये जो कोकोनट ट्रीज उनकी छत पर गिरी थी, वो उनके लिए एक वरदान के रूप में आए. डिस्गाइज मीन्स भेष बदलना. Because the tender coconuts from the trees kept the trapped family from starving in the several days that followed. Means that tree was having some coconuts, so those coconuts helped the family from starving. Starving means भूखे मरने से उनको उन नारियल के पेड़ों ने, जो नारियल के फल थे, उन्होंने बचाया. For the next 2 days, Prashant sat huddled with his friend's family in the open on the rooftop. See, for 2 days, the whole family was sitting and hiding themselves at the roof. They froze in the cold. Froze in the cold means ठंड से बिल्कुल बर्फ जम गई थी. And incessant rain, cold and incessant rain, ठंड भी थी और जो continuously, incessant means continuously जो rain गिर रही थी, बारिश हो रही थी, उससे. The rain water washed away Prashant's tears. अब क्या हुआ, जब बारिश कम हुई धीरे धीरे, तो उसके बाद जो प्रशांत की आंखों में आंसू थे, वो सब उसके खत्म से ही हो गए, पुछ गए. The only thought that flashed through his mind was whether his family had survived the fury of the super cyclone. So now, when he was seeing the devastation all around the country, that all around the state, all around the city, so just a thought strike in his mind whether his family is alive or not. मीन्स उसके परिवार ने सरवाइव अपने आप को कर पाया कि नहीं इतने बड़े साइक्लोन में. Was he to be bereaved once again? Bereaved means suffering from grief. Means till now he was suffering from a grief of his mother's death. So now he thought that it will be possible that he will have to face some more grief again. Means उसको दोबारा से दुख तो नहीं झेलना पड़ेगा. 2 days later, which seemed to Prashant like 2 years, the rain ceased and the rainwater slowly began to recede. Now, after 2 days, the rain ceased. Ceased means stopped, बंद हो गई. And the rainwater slowly began to recede. Recede means कम होने लगा. Prashant was determined to seek out his family without further delay. So now Prashant decided that he should search for his family and he should not delay in moving from that house. But the situation was still dangerous and his friend's family pleaded with Prashant to stay back a little while longer. Means at that time the situation was still dangerous. His family requested him not to go but to stay there with them for a little bit, for 1 or 2 days more. But Prashant knew he had to go. But as the thought arose in his mind that whether he will be able to meet his family again or not, so he decided that he should go up now. He equipped himself with a long, sturdy stick. Okay, equipped means अपने आप को उसने क्या ले लिया अपने साथ में सामान, एक लंबी सी stick, hard. And then started on his 18-kilometer expedition back to his village through the swollen flood waters. देखिए वहां पर कोई रोड तो दिख नहीं रही थी, चारों तरफ पानी ही पानी था, लेकिन पानी थोड़ा कम तो हो रहा था, लेकिन उसको अपने घर वालों से मिलने की बहुत जल्दी थी। उसको वो सोच रहा था कहीं ऐसा ना हो कि मुझे दोबारा से दुख में फिर से मैं इन्वॉल्व हो जाऊं, तो इसलिए उसने क्या किया, एक लंबी सी स्टिक ली और पानी में से होते हुए उसको जाना पड़ा। Expedition. Expedition means journey. It was a journey he would never forget, and that journey he will never forget in his own life. He constantly had to use his stick to locate the road, to determine where the water was most shallow. मीन्स उसको अपनी लकड़ी जो एक स्टिक अपने साथ ले जा रहा था, तो उसको बार बार यूज कर करके देखना पड़ रहा था कि कहाँ पे सड़क है, कहाँ पे बहुत ज्यादा गहरा गड्ढा है, कहाँ पे कम है. At places it was waist deep, means at some of the places it was not so deep, and progress was slow. So at that time, when the water was still waist, the progress was slow, means he was not at all able to move fastly. At several points, he lost the road and had to swim. At some points, he had to swim. After some distance, he was relieved to find two friends of his uncle who were also returning to their village. So when he moved further, he found two friends of his uncle, and those two men were also returning to their village. They decided to move ahead together. So all these three people started moving ahead together. As they waded through the waters, the scenes they witnessed grew more and more macabre. Means जैसे जैसे वो आगे बढ़ते गए, तो जो सीन था वो और भी खतरनाक, डरावना सा उनको दिखने लगा. They had to push away many human bodies, man, woman, children, and carcasses of dogs, goats, and cattle that the current swept against them as they moved ahead. मीन्स वो चारों तरफ पानी तो भरा ही हुआ था, लेकिन वो जैसे जैसे आगे बढ़ते गए तो उनको कई ह्यूमन बॉडीज अपने रास्ते से हटानी पड़ गई, और कई डॉग्स मीन्स एनिमल्स की भी जो डेड बॉडीज थी उनको भी उसको हटाना पड़ गया. In every village that they passed, they could barely see a house standing. Means जितने विलेजेस से होते हुए वो निकले, उनको वहां पर बहुत ही कम घर खड़े हुए मिले. मीन्स एवरीथिंग वॉज डिस्ट्रॉयड. Prashant now wept out loud and long. He was sure that his family could not have survived this catastrophe. So now that Prashant thought that now his family would have been died. Catastrophe means disaster. He thought that his family could not have survived this disaster. Eventually, Prashant reached his village, Kalikuda. So, after such a long distance, 18-kilometer distance covered with a hardship, he reached his village, Kalikuda. His heart went cold. Where their home once stood, there were only remnants of its roof. Remnants means अवशेष. मीन्स जहां पर उसका घर खड़ा होता था, तो वहां पर अब सिर्फ उसके घर की छत के अवशेष बचे थे. Some of their belongings were caught, mangled, and twisted in the branches of trees, just visible above the dark waters. तो जहां तक उसने अपनी दूर तक नजर दौड़ाई, वहां पर उसको कुछ सामान पेड़ की जो ब्रांचेस थी वहां पर फंसा हुआ उसको मिला. Young Prashant decided to go to the Red Cross shelter to look for his family. So Prashant decided to go to the Red Cross Society in order to search for his family. He thought that might be they would have gone there as a refugee. Among the first people he saw in the crowd was his maternal grandmother, Nani. Okay, so whom he saw his grandmother. Weak with hunger means she was very weak as she has not eaten anything. She rushed to him, her hands outstretched. Outstretched means spread, फैलाना. Her eyes brimming. Brimming means आंसुओं से भर गई. So when she saw him, her eyes were filled with tears and she stretched her hands. It was a miracle, Jadoo. They had long given him up for a dead. They thought that Prashant is now no more, as Prashant was searching for his family and his family was also searching for Prashant. They both were thinking that they all are dead. Quickly, word spread, and his extended family gathered around him and hugged him tight in relief. So, when this message reached to his all the family members, everybody came towards him and they hugged him tightly. Prashant anxiously scanned the motley, battered group. So, what happened? Anxiously, he watched the whole group. His brother, sister, uncle, aunts, they all seemed to be there. So he found that the whole of his family was there and they are safe. By the next morning, as he took in the desperate situation in the shelter, he decided to get a grip over himself. मीन्स रेस्क्यू कैंप में जब शेल्टर मीन्स रेस्क्यू कैंप में जब वो आया तो बहुत ही अजीब सी कंडीशन थी उसकी. सो नाउ ही डिसाइडेड दैट नाउ ही विल कंट्रोल हिमसेल्फ. He sensed a deathly grief settling upon the 2,500 strong crowd in the shelter. तो उसने क्या देखा, वहां पे 2,500 के करीब लोग हैं और सब मतलब इतने परेशान है, न खाने को मिल रहा है, न ढंग से रहने का, साफ सफाई कुछ भी नहीं था. 86 lives were lost in the village. See, 86 people were dead. All the 96 houses had been washed away. So there were 96 houses in that village and they all were washed away. It was their fourth day at the shelter. Now this was the fourth day. So far they had survived on green coconuts, but they were too few to go around such a tumult of people. Means till now they were eating only green coconuts, and there were only few people who can go and bring those coconut or food for them. So they were all now feeling very hungry. Prashant, all of 19 years, decided to step in as leader of his village if no one else did. So, Prashant was of 19 years. He decided to become a leader of his village if no one else was deciding to become. He organized a group of youths and elders to jointly pressurize the merchant once again to part with his rice. तो उसने क्या किया, एक यूथ का ग्रुप बनाया और कुछ उसमें बड़े लोगों को भी ज्वाइन किया और उन्होंने जो मर्चेंट्स थे उनको प्रेशराइज किया कि जो लोगों ने अनाज दबाकर रख लिया है उसको इन लोगों को दे दे. This time, the delegation succeeded and returned triumphantly. So, क्या हुआ? Delegation succeeded means जो इन लोगों ने काम शुरू किया था और उनको विजय मिली, प्राप्त हुई. Wading through the receding waters with food for the entire shelter. So, after pressurizing the merchant, they got the food for the whole members who were there in the shelter. No one cared that the rice was already rotting. Rotting means खराब हो गया था, सड़ गया था. So nobody cared that the rice was rotting, spoiled. They all were very hungry, so they ate those rotted rice also, spoiled rice also. Branches from fallen trees were gathered to light a reluctant and slow fire on which to cook the rice. For the first time in 4 days, the survivors at the cyclone shelter were able to fill their bellies. Means इतने दिन में पहली बार उन्होंने खाना खाया था. उन सब ने, जितने भी शेल्टर में रिफ्यूजीज थे, उन सब ने खाना पेट भरकर खाया था. His next task was to organize a team of youth volunteers to clean the shelter of filth, urine, vomit, and floating carcasses, and to tend to the wounds and fractures of the many who had been injured. So now he decided that he would make a team of youth volunteers, and he will clean the shelters, and he will provide the medicine to the wounded people. On the fifth day, a military helicopter flew over the shelter and dropped some food parcels. Whenever such type of disasters occur, military people, that helicopter used to flew, and they used to drop food packages and medicine packages too. It then did not return. Only for one time it went, but it did not came back. The youth task force gathered empty utensils from the shelter. अब जब वो हेलीकॉप्टर वापस दोबारा कभी आया नहीं, तो what they did, they all collected the utensils, यानी कि बर्तन पूरे जितने भी शेल्टर में थे. Then they deputed the children to lie in the sand left by the waters around the shelter with these utensils on their stomachs to communicate to the passing helicopters that they were hungry. So what they did, they made the young children to lie on the sand, and on their stomach they kept those utensils which they had gathered from the people of the shelter, and from in order to communicate means उनको helicopters वालों को बताने के लिए कि that they are hungry. The message got through, and after that the helicopter made regular rounds of the shelter. So the helicopter people were able to see that these people are not having any of the food and all things. So that helicopter took many rounds for them, and they dropped food and other basic needs things also. Prashant found that a large number of children had been orphaned. Orphaned means anath ho gaye the. He brought them together and put up a polythene sheet shelter for them. He brought those children together and made a shelter by using a polythene. Women were mobilized to look after them while the man secured food and materials for the shelter. And he made women to look after those children who are orphaned, and he asked the man to bring food for or the other materials, eatable materials for the people. Okay. As the weeks passed, Prashant was quick to recognize that the women and children were sinking deeper and deeper in their grief. Grief यानी कि दुख. अब उसके जैसे दिन बीतते गए तो उसको क्या लगा कि इस शेल्टर में जितने लोग हैं, बच्चे हैं और लेडीज हैं, वो सब किसी न किसी की डेथ को लेकर दुख में घुलती जा रही हैं. He persuaded the woman to start working in the food for work program started by an NGO, and for the children he organized sports events. So he asked women to start working, means start preparing food for the people, and he made one. He organized a sport events for the children. He himself loved to play cricket, and so he organized cricket matches for children. Prashant engaged with other volunteers in helping the widows and children to pick up the broken pieces of their lives. Means Prashant ने और भी volunteers, और भी जो लोग थे, उन सबको widows और children, यानी कि widows यानी कि जिनके husband की death हो गई थी और जो बच्चे अनाथ हो गए थे, उन लोगों को अपनी life दोबारा से start करने में help करने लगे. The initial government plan was to set up institutions for orphans and widows. And the government plan was to set institution for these orphans and widows. However, this step was successfully resisted as it was felt that in such institutions, children would grow up without love. तो क्या हुआ, इस तरह के जो गवर्नमेंट ने इंस्टीट्यूशन इन अनाथ बच्चों के लिए और विडोज के लिए जो खोलने की कोशिश की थी, तो इन लोगों ने उसको मना कर दिया। क्यों? वो लोग कह रहे थे कि इस तरह तो बच्चे तो अनाथ आश्रम ही रहेगा, उनको प्यार तो मिलेगा नहीं, और जो विडोज हैं दे वुड सफर फ्रॉम स्टिग्मा एंड लोनलीनेस, मीन्स उनको उनकी लाइफ में ये जो शौक मिला था कि उनके हस्बैंड की डेथ हो गई या बच्चों की डेथ हो गई है, तो वो अकेलापन तो उनका खत्म नहीं होगा। So Prashant's group believed orphans should be resettled in their own community itself, possibly in new foster families made up of childless widows and children without adult care. तो प्रशांत ने क्या सोचा कि ये जो विडोज है या जो ऑर्फन बच्चे हैं, इन लोगों की एक नई फैमिली बना दी जाएगी और वो उसी की कम्युनिटी में होंगे जहां पर जो विडोज है वो उन्हीं बच्चों की केयर करेंगे जो ऑर्फन्ड है, सो दे विल गेट द केयर. It is 6 months after the devastation of the super cyclone. This time, Prashant's wounded spirit has healed simply because he had no time to bother about his own pain. So after 6 months, he was busy in helping those people. So he had no time to think about his own pain. His handsome, youthful face is what the widows and orphan children of his village seek out most in their darkest hour of grief. Means उसका जो फेस था, हमेशा चाहे कोई भी दुख में होता था, चाहे वो विडोज हो, ऑर्फन चिल्ड्रन हो, उनको हमेशा उसी का चेहरा दिखता था. Okay, so this is a chapter. Thank you.